Mr. President, 2 weeks ago I came to the floor of the Senate to ask for consent on a simple, timely Senate resolution sponsored by nearly half of the members of this chamber. What did the resolution call for? Well, it urged the United States to join global coronavirus vaccine and treatment efforts. That doesn't sound like a radical idea, does it? In the midst of a global pandemic causing so much suffering and so many deaths, it would seem that asking the United States to join other countries of the world in searching for therapies and vaccines is just common sense. We don't know where or when a vaccine will be discovered. We don't know if an effective treatment will be discovered in the United States or some other place. Certainly with the respected medical and scientific leadership in the United States, you would hope that it would be here. But let's be honest. If a safe and effective vaccine against the coronavirus is discovered in some other country, the United States wants to be there, part of the discussion about its production and distribution, wouldn't we? That's all this resolution says. Why not team up with allies around the world, since we're all looking for the same thing, a safe and effective vaccine? Whether that vaccine is stamped made in the USA or made in some other country, to me, is secondary. Is it safe? Is it effective? Will it save lives? Do we really want the American people to be left out of such an effort? The global efforts to eliminate smallpox, Ebola, polio, and so many other deadly diseases, we took for granted. It was a global effort. We were all in it together. These viruses and diseases don't know any boundaries. People around the world have the same fear and concern that we have in the United States about what we are paying in a price of suffering and death until we find a way to avoid it. So this resolution, which just called on the United States to be part of a global effort to find a therapy and a vaccine, this resolution was blocked here in the Senate. Well, since then, since 2 weeks have passed, we've lost over 100,000 American lives, and sadly, the number still grows. 100,000 lives in just a few months. The same number of American casualties in the wars of Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan combined. What was President Trump's response? Empathy or a message of national unity or healing during this tragic moment? No. Once again, President Trump refused to take any responsibility for leadership during this crisis. Sadly, he has cast blame in every direction and ignored his own responsibility. Amid a deadly global pandemic that is having devastating consequences on American people, sadly, we lead the world in infections and death. President Trump has decided now is the moment in history for the United States to pull out of the World Health Organization, the same body that's heading a global pandemic response. What is he thinking? That we would walk away from the organization that has called to the table countries from around the world in an effort to find a safe and effective vaccine? Here we are on the 40th anniversary of the World Health Organization's historic achievement eradicating smallpox, stumbling along with a president more interested in settling a score, casting blame, and finding ways to divide us. Once again, the majority in this party here in the Senate are not chiming in and joining us in this effort to pass this resolution. While we continue to have some of the world's best researchers and experts, it's plausible that the vaccine will be found and developed elsewhere. In a rush to research and validate a vaccine, ramp up production, address global allocation, supply needs, ensure affordability and access worldwide, make sure the United States gets its fair share of any safe and effective vaccine, where will we stand if the president insists that we're on the sidelines, unengaged? When the United States pursues this Trump go-it-alone approach while the rest of the world is working together, where does that leave us? Pride cometh before the fall. Just as with the smallpox effort, a global collaborative approach makes obvious sense, and it will save American lives. Joining forces with other countries around the world will help speed the development and eventual distribution of a coronavirus vaccine that we desperately seek. Do you want to know what one Republican senator from Tennessee said about this? He said, "I disagree with the president's decision. Withdrawing U.S. membership from WHO could, among other things, interfere with clinical trials essential to the development of vaccine." No one knows where this vaccine will eventually be perfected or produced, and God willing, it will be soon. But why shouldn't we be joining in this global effort? Why? Why at this moment in history, as President Trump said, we are stepping away from the organization that leads this effort? Given this president's, sadly, I hate to use a word, but obsession with blaming everyone but himself for mishandling this situation, maybe his dereliction of duty should come as no surprise, but what a bitter, bitter disappointment. I return to the floor to ask consent on this straightforward resolution. Simple resolution that should have passed without any fanfare by voice vote unanimously in the Senate. This resolution calls on the United States to join in a global effort to find a safe and effective vaccine, something that we have done consistently throughout our history until this president took office. Ultimately, let's remember, this is a pandemic that affects the world, and any solution has to be a worldwide solution as well. We cannot isolate ourselves from the international race to find treatments and develop a vaccine. Doing so not only wastes times, but it risks the loss of life. Mr. President, as if in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent the Committee on Foreign Relations be discharged from further consideration of SRES 579, a resolution encouraging the international community to remain committed to collaboration and coordination to mitigate and prevent the further spread of COVID-19, and urging renewed United States leadership and participation in any global effort on therapeutics and vaccine development and delivery to address COVID-19 and prevent further death. That the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration, resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, and the motions to reconsider be considered, made, and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Without objection? Is there an objection?
President, reserving the right to object.
The senator from Idaho.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, let me commend my good friend from Illinois for bringing this. And I know he's as frustrated as all of us are with what's happened with this pandemic that came out of China and has swept the world and caused the grief that it has for America and for every other country on the planet, really. It's important to note, I think, as we start here, that the United States has been the single most generous donor of global health assistance in the world. Now, we do hear people from time to time criticize foreign assistance that America gives out, but probably the pandemic that we've just gone through from with this COVID-19 from China is the best indication that there is why certain foreign assistance is so crucial. This foreign assistance we give in the healthcare area is given amongst other reasons, to keep those things from spreading to the United States. Last year alone, we, the United States of America, we American taxpayers provided over $9 billion in global health assistance to the State Department and USAID. Now that $9 billion does not account for the amount that the CDC spent in global health efforts. So it's well over $9 billion that we Americans have put out there. We strengthen health systems, we train health workers, we build supply chains, we connect health networks, we support cutting-edge research and innovation, and yes, develop and expand access to therapies and vaccines, which is what my good friend from Illinois is addressing here when it comes to vaccines. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. We led the international efforts to combat AIDS, malaria, tuberculosis, polio, Ebola, and other of the viruses that came out of China. We are the single largest donor to the Global Fund and UN agencies, including UNICEF. Now, I hope that there isn't a suggestion here that we are withdrawing from collaborative efforts to develop COVID-19 vaccine because we did not directly participate in the EU pledging conference. In reality, leading partners in that effort include the Global Fund and Gavi, where we are the major donors. So we will be participating in the collaborative effort to develop COVID-19. I think it's also important to note that the president has made a historic 3-year pledge and is strongly supporting Gavi's COVID-19 efforts. Now, Gavi stands for the Global Alliance for Vaccines. It was essentially the brainchild of Bill Gates. He and Melinda, of course, are, in my judgment, on equal level with Mother Teresa for what they've done with global health. We are participating in Gavi, and like I said, the president has made a historic 3-year pledge to that. Look, I appreciate the feelings that the good senator from Illinois has about the President of the United States, and he did indeed put the brakes on WHO because he felt that there were shortcomings with WHO when it came to WHO's work with China and their failure really to get after China at the very beginning of this to do what it really should have done. I'm going to object to this resolution, not because the effort by the good senator from Illinois isn't well taken. It is well taken. And we had a similar one 2 weeks ago, and I came out here and objected to it, and the senator is frustrated because he feels that we should be doing more. Well, first of all, during the 2 weeks, we obviously were gone for a week, but let me tell you what was going on during that week and the subsequent week. I promised you at that time that the Foreign Relations Committee was going to take this issue on because it is of such importance that we don't go through this again. And there's a lot more we can do than simply passing a resolution. It is my ambition to create a very significant piece of legislation that will be bipartisan, that creates a vehicle to address a fast-moving virus like this. Now, we can all argue about the WHO, what they did or didn't do, their connections to China and that sort of thing. That's not going to help us as we go forward. What we do know is WHO has done good work in the past. They were a really good partner, as you know, Senator, with us when it came to implementing PEPFAR and doing great things in the battle against AIDS. They were very helpful in polio, very helpful in smallpox. But this was a different virus. This was a house on fire. And WHO is simply not, at this time, geared to be a fireman. When the fire bell rings, we need a vehicle to address a virus. And this is going to happen again because in the Wuhan district, there's a vast bat population, and they're carrying about 2,000 different species of virus. And unfortunately and frighteningly, we don't know what all those viruses can do. Heaven help us if we get one out of there that's worse than the COVID-19 that we've had. But we need a fire department that can address this. I hope we're going to be able to engage China. If not, we're going to have to find ways of dealing with this. Now, what's that vehicle? Where's that vehicle going to be carried? Is it going to be a new part of WHO? Is it going to be part of the CDC? Is it going to be a new international organization? I can't answer that. But I can tell you this. On a bipartisan basis, Senator Murphy, also a member of the Foreign Relations Committee, and I have introduced a bill to address a number of these things, including the vaccine question, and including working on getting a vehicle to do what I've described. I think that I think everyone's working on this in good faith. The bill that we introduced is written on paper. It's not written on stone. We are wide open to suggestions as to what kind of a vehicle it is that will address this like a fireman and not in a slower fashion like other health challenges have presented. And so Senator Murphy and I have had a number of discussions on this. We are both committed to reach the goals that I know you want to reach, Senator Durbin, and that I think this whole body wants to reach. We're going to hold a series of hearings as to how to do this, how best to do it, how it should be funded, how it should be organized, and how the management should take place. What it's not going to focus on is the finger pointing for what happened after Wuhan escaped from a bat into a human being in Wuhan, China, and what happened after it left Wuhan, China, and went around the world. We've got really good information on that already. There's going to be a lot of other investigations and hearings and that sort of thing. We want to talk about what do we do when this happens in the future. How can we create an agency that, just like a fire department, when the bell rings, they pull their boots on, they slide down the pole, they get on the truck, and they go put out the fire? And I commit to you, Senator, we will continue to work with this. My staff tells me, and I'm glad to hear, that your staff was working with them on the language on this particular resolution. And I thank you for that, and I invite you and commit to you that we will work with you as we develop this new legislation and as we go through the hearings. So again, please don't take this as combative. It is not. It is intended in the best spirit to help us all move forward to get to a piece of very significant legislation that will hopefully take us forward like PEPFAR did and like some of those other monumental pieces of legislation that can address this incredibly, incredibly difficult situation and hurtful situation, not only for America, but for the world. And I invite your participation, encourage your participation, and assure you that we'll work in good faith to try to reach these goals. So with that, Mr. President, I object for the reasons stated.
Mr. President.
Objection
Mr. President,
is heard.
I have respect for my colleague from Idaho. Thank you for your positive statement about work to be done in the Foreign Relations Committee. There's nothing in this resolution that preempts or tries to have an impact on anything you've mentioned. The operative language is a few words: urging renewed U.S. leadership and participation in any global effort on therapeutics and vaccine development and delivery to address COVID-19 and prevent further death. How we do that, whether we create an agency or not, this is simply an expression of policy which I hope we can embrace. I'll be back if we don't move forward with alternatives. Lives are at stake, and we should be part of the international conversation to avoid that. Mr. President, I ask consent to speak on one unrelated item.
Would you yield for just a few moments so I can respond to your comments?
Sure, of course.
Thank you. Senator, first of all, I appreciate those comments, and there's nothing you just said that I disagree with. One thing in passing this, and I say this in the spirit of trying to get to the objective that I laid out, and that is, it is my intent to engage the second branch of government, not only the agencies that are responsible for this, Health and Human Services, Homeland Security, the State Department, USAID, but also the White House. I mean, the president has to have a role here. He's obviously undertaken the role. I've already spoken to him about this. I intend to have other lengthy conversations about this. I'm engaging him to assist us because this is not a partisan issue. As you pointed out, and rightfully so, this virus doesn't care whether you're Republican or Democrat. It doesn't care whether you're an American or not an American. It doesn't care whether you're the President of the United States or, in the case of some countries around the world, a member of the highest authority there is in that country. The virus just doesn't care. And in order for us to accomplish this, it's going to be a bill. It's not going to be a resolution. And it's got to be approved by the second branch of government. They fully understand what we're trying to do here. They have committed their their resources and their input to this. And I think they're working, I'm convinced, they're working in good faith, just as everyone here is, to try to reach these goals of doing something better in the future than what we've experienced just recently. Senator, again, thank you for your attention to this. Thank you for your input in this. And I commit to you we'll work together on this as we go forward. Thank you, Mr. President.